everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm doing a bit of a different video, and I apologize for the lack of uploads so far this week. I haven't been really feeling 100%, but let's get into it. So today I put up a poll this past week talking about red armor versus gold armor, and I really want to discuss this because it really surprised me, and I've had a lot of people come to the streams asking their advice and tips about when you should be utilizing red and when you should be utilizing gold. Now, the beauty behind this is that this is a mechanic that I feel is super balanced, and I want to really break this down into 6 different tips. The first tip we're going to discuss is timing. The second tip is going to discuss the number of resources you have in your inventory. So tip number 3 is going to discuss the role you play and then whether you're entry fragger or support. And then tip number 4, the remaining damage to armor. Tip number 5 is going to be the balance of the two, of like having too much gold, too much red in your squad. And then of course, tip number 6 is engagement type. So let us discuss first and foremost the discussion of, well, timing. What I want to discuss is how long it takes for you to full heal with cells or red armor. When you do this, this is essentially a cell takes 3 seconds to heal up 25 hit points. So if you times 3 and you have 5 slots, well, that's a total of 15 seconds. Now realize how much time this is taking as we're topping this off, and when you're in an encounter, how much downtime this can be. When you do this, you're definitely going to be in engagement that's far away. Now if we do this again, utilizing a battery only takes 5 seconds. So 5 seconds versus 15 is literally 1/3 the amount of time, and it's quite fast. So that's really looking at the timing. Let's look at the timing now for gold armor, realizing now what gold armor does. Let me drop that on the ground so I can't drop it properly. I'm going to throw an arc start at my feet. When you know a cell before only took 1 to pop a single 25 additional HP. Now when you have gold armor, this replaces that and you heal for 2 slots rather than just 1. So you're topped off. Now you're topped off within around 6 seconds. And you get a give and take the stopping and starting of the animation as well. And then when you time that versus a battery, you pop that and then boom, you got 5 seconds. So this leads us to the next tip when you talk about resources. So tip number 2, the number of resources you have. Now let's say you look at your inventory, and this is already a great example. Let's say for some magical reason you happen to have 11 batteries. Running gold does not make a whole lot of sense to run if you have that many batteries in your inventory. Why is that? Well, the cells are technically the minority in terms of what you have in terms of the number of resources. If you have that many, then you know based on timing that a red armor is going to be a lot more beneficial to run than a gold armor if you have that many resources. Now let's say you only have 1 bat and you're in the end zone and you have red. You know in one encounter, unless you thirst somebody, you do not have the resources to then, well, top off effectively. Because remember, this takes 5 cells. Let's just remove 2. Let's say we only have 4. You can't top off effectively here, but you could if you had a gold armor. Now, resource management is really something to understand, especially with your team. If you go through your team and you come and say how many batteries does everyone have, and everyone only has 1 apiece, and you all have red armor, this might lead to a better decision to run more gold, at least more gold armors until you get more resources and you can swap them out. So the number of resources you have is very dependent. If you have 20 cells and you have 0 bats, well then having a gold armor is going to be a lot more beneficial in terms of utilizing those resources than it would be to run a red. So hopefully that makes sense. To recap, check your inventory what you have. If you have a lot of batteries, shoot for red. If you have more cells, shoot for gold. And then check in with your team and understand what resources you have at your disposal. Now tip number 3, the role you play. Entry fragger / support. This is really important because once you understand your resources, you can choose the armor that's going to benefit you. If let's say you were a Wraith and entry fragging and doing a lot of damage initially here, and you know, let's say for example you were punching or what have you, and then you're fighting and you queue back. Let's just say this is at the start and you happen to have a battery and magically had red armor and you reset and pop your bat, well then you're going to be able to get it back into the fight after 5 seconds, right? Now, if you do not have a lot of batteries and you decide to run a, let's say, a gold instead, a gold is really, really strong for entry fragging, especially whenever you're fighting early on and you don't have the batteries, knowing that if you take a little bit of damage, that it's okay that you're able to queue back and reset quickly and do the same thing. And if anything, you can get back into the fight a little bit sooner with the benefit of gold. So let's say you pop even just 1, but at least now at this point, technically you have a white armor. So you can go right back into the fight pretending you have essentially a white armor to help out your teammate immediately if it calls for a fast reset, rather than leaving them alone for those 2 additional seconds. Seconds really matter in terms of a reset and getting into a gunfight and getting out. So I know that 2 seconds from a battery or gold doesn't seem like a really big deal, but it does when you're utilizing resources. Let's say you only took about 50 damage and you weren't even fully cracked, then a gold armor is going to be even more beneficial to reset than it would be to use a battery for a full red armor. Now, the opposite spectrum, let us say that you are a support character and you're shooting from a distance, right? Let's say you're all the way up height. It may not make sense to blow all your batteries, and it may make sense to have your support player, if you're playing a lot more passive with your team, if they're sniping, because usually when you get sniped, you get hit for, let's say, 70 in the body. But you know that's only 2 cells, rather than utilizing a full battery and waiting to get cracked. The downside here, and I want you to understand the thought process here, is that if you get cracked, it means that the enemy team is going to be more inclined to push you. So with that, if you do get hit with gold armor and they know you can sell up quickly and get right back into the fight, it's a nice reset. So kind of play to your team's strengths and weaknesses. If you realize you're playing a lot more passive, give the gold to your support person who is sniping or getting the entry damage. If you notice you're playing full aggro and making a lot of big plays, then sure, give it to the entry fragger. And to make those decisions to when they need to queue back, because then if the person who's coming in right after has red armor, then that's going to be a lot more hefty, because that 25 HP will make a difference. Now, tip number 4 is the remaining damage to armor. This is something really important to highlight and understand. It's how much damage you have remaining on your armor. We kind of discussed it earlier, but understand that with gold, even switching those around and using cells, let's say you only get hit for around 50 damage, can make a big difference rather than using a battery. So having somebody able on the team to utilize that resource is very beneficial to topping off, rather than wasting just battery after battery after battery, because batteries are a lot harder to find than cells. I'm sure everyone will notice that the only way to get more batteries is to loot more areas or defeat more teams, and that's when you find a surplus of batteries. Otherwise, you're always going to be at a kind of a low end, especially when you're playing high tier ranked or competitive. Batteries are always going to be harder to come by, especially because a lot of poke damage happens, and that's where gold has a lot more strength. Another tip to add to remaining damage to armor that's really important. So one could be the remaining damage to your actual health pool, but also how much you have to level up. So let's say you have the remaining amount of damage is still 700 to purple armor and it's not going to level up to red, and you have a gold right in front of you and there's only 2 squads remaining. It is very important in that moment to grab the gold armor instead. You are not going to level up 750 damage within a few seconds, and when there's only 2 teams remaining. So understand how much damage you need to deal before you level up. Here's another example. Let's say your team has been very much in shambles and all you had was blue armors across the whole squad. If all you guys had was blue armors and you're in the top 5 situation and you see 2 gold armors on the ground and there's no purples or anything, it may be more beneficial to grab the gold armors in that situation, because the amount of damage you need to do before you level them up is going to be it's going to take a lot more time, and it's going to cost resources. Remember, even though you level up the armor, you're going to have to sell those up still, which are going to take 2 more cells from a blue to a red, which is still, quite substantial to level up. This goes into tip number 5, balance. Too much gold armors or too much red armors. You may think it's a big benefit to have everyone in your team have gold armors. The downside of this is that you're not utilizing batteries, and batteries, as you know, only take 5 seconds compared to a gold armor, which takes a little bit longer than 6, because remember, you have to have that little reset animation and maybe you mess it up in between, and that's important to take notice of as well. And you don't want all red armors. If you have all red armors, the downside to everyone having red in this circumstance that you will find is that you need endless amount of batteries, and you're not really utilizing the cells to really reset. Your team does have the extra HP at that point, which is an additional 75 across the team, but the problem is that if everyone has a longer time to reset, then you're going to have an issue. A healthy balance is at least to have 1 gold armor on the team and then 2 red armors, which is very beneficial to help. Now, tip number 6, the last one that we're going to wrap up on, is engagement type. We kind of covered this already, but just to kind of recap, is just to understand your engagement level. Let's say you have multiple teams. You got a team here, you have a team on the low ground, and you have a team holding this angle. Realize whether your engagement is going to be long range or close range, and decide on your armor types. If you're going to play aggressive, having more reds, it can be beneficial, but remember to balance them out. And if you're going to play more long range and more poke damage, then a gold armor in terms of resources may be beneficial towards you. If a team is really hunkering down, I guarantee you they're going to have way less batteries versus a team that's been playing very aggro and grabbing batteries off of pretty much everybody they can find. Now, if they're fighting too much, then of course they can utilize too much of their resources, and that's all very important to manage. Now, again, I hope you guys found this video helpful. I've been seeing this discussed a whole lot, the question of gold versus red. I think these tips are very helpful to make sure you make the informed decision. Just always remember to check how much damage you have remaining, what resources you have in your inventory, the timing it takes to heal these up, and also the amount of resources you have across your whole team. I appreciate all of you guys for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.